All right, we'll go ahead and get started. This is Chris Berry with Castle Wealth Group. We do these we do these weekly wisdom webinars where we talk legal, financial, and tax planning, just answering questions that come up throughout the week, or if someone submits something during the webinar. We always start with positive focus. My positive focus is I had like an emergency hip surgery about a week or two ago. That's not the positive part. I had a total hip replacement about 3 years ago on my left hip. And then I was doing jiu-jitsu, which is like a wrestling grappling type thing. And my hip kind of popped out and the lining came out and it was pretty gnarly. Couldn't walk. Within about a day or so, or 48 hours, I was able to get in for surgery and get that all cleared up. And this week I'm finally off of, or I'm able to walk without assistance. So no canes or anything like that. So that's good. Much easier recovery than the first time I had that hip replacement. So everything's going well there. So now we'll get into the questions. And this is kind of following up on a question from before and talking about investments. And so when I talk about investments or any specific investment tool, I typically say any investment tool as a general can have 2 out of any 3 characteristics. And so when I'm drawing in front of a whiteboard, I'll draw a triangle. And those 3 characteristics are: 1, at the top of the triangle, we can have growth. We want our investment to grow. On the left side, bottom part of the triangle, we have liquidity. We want to get access to our funds. And then on the bottom right side of the triangle, we have safety. We don't want to lose what we have. And again, each like investment tool kind of falls somewhere in there. And so when we're putting together a comprehensive estate plan, typically we're using a variety of these different tools to fit along the different parts of the triangle. So we want some investments that are safe and liquid. That's typically money that we have at the bank in cash, maybe high yield savings accounts, where the money is safe, it's liquid, we can pull that money out, but it's not really geared towards growth. So typically we don't want too much money sitting there because we're missing out on growth. We're missing out on, we're not keeping up with inflation. They just said the inflation rates for next year, like 2.5%, which is crazy. Like my hamburgers still cost double what they used to. So the money is not growing, but it's safe and liquid. So it's great for emergency funds, great for any expenses you have throughout the year. If you're retired, great for covering that income gap between your Social Security and pension, whatever your expenses are. And that's where a lot of times we're using a high yield savings account to try to get as much growth as possible, but really it's focusing on that safety and liquidity. And then on the left side of the triangle, we have money that's geared towards liquidity and growth, but there's no guarantees of principal protection or safety. So that's where we have things in the market, and we can have aggressive portfolios, we can have conservative portfolios. In fact, there's even some alternative investments like buffered ETFs that we can have in the market that do have a little bit of downside protection, but there's no guarantees of protection from the investment itself. And so it's important to have money over on that side. And then on the other, but understand that there's always a risk associated with money on that side of the coin or that side of the triangle. Then we can have money that's geared towards safety and growth, but typically we have to give up some liquidity. So on the short term, you would look at things like CDs, where if you take the money out within the 3 months or 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, you might pay a fee or a penalty. You have things like multi-year guaranteed annuities, which are similar to CDs, but offered by insurance companies, typically on a longer time range, like 3, 5, or 7 years. Typically, they're going to give you a better fixed rate of return than a CD. It really just depends on where interest rates are. And again, the Fed just recently cut interest rates. So all the rates on CDs and everything, high yield savings accounts, MYGAs have dropped a little bit. And then kind of even a longer time horizon, we have things like fixed index annuities. And so the key with all these things is that whatever you put into it, you're not going to lose your money. So if the market drops 20%, you don't lose anything. With the MYGAs and the CDs, you're going to get a fixed rate of return for that period of time. So each year it's going to reset. I have a client that has a 5.5% MYGA right now. And so each year they're going to get 5.5%, no matter if the market goes up 20, the market drops 20. So it guarantees that they're going to get some rate of return. But the idea is they're not going to touch this money for, say, 5 years. And then we have things like fixed index annuities, which there's lots of different types of them. The big thing is they're principal protected. So if the market drops, you're not going to lose anything. And then if the market goes up, you're going to collect a portion of the upside. Also, we can have a portion into a fixed account. So we're getting a guaranteed rate of return for at least a portion of whatever we have in that fixed index annuity. So it's a great way to look at growth and also make sure that you don't lose anything, especially as we're going into a kind of crazy time with presidential elections and 2025 and everything like that. Now, we do have to give up some liquidity with those. And I had a client kind of reach out and say, hey, I don't want my money all tied up, but let's say you put $1 million, and I'm not suggesting everyone's situation is a little bit different, but let's say you put $1 million into a fixed index annuity. Typically, in terms of liquidity, you can take out 10% a year without paying any fees. So you could pull $100,000 out, whether the market goes up or down, without paying any fees. So if the market drops 20% and you're pulling $100,000 out of the market side, you don't have a chance to make that up. Versus if the market drops 20%, you're pulling it out of the fixed index annuity side, you haven't lost anything. So it's not like you're suffering from that sequence of return risks. And then in terms of the liquidity issue is typically you can take out 10% without any fees. But that said, you can pull the whole thing out within a year if you want to. There might be some fees associated with it. But so when we're putting together a comprehensive financial plan, we're looking at time horizons. What are people's goals? And then trying to kind of figure out where within this triangle we want to have their investment tool set up. And maybe you're very anti the annuity side of things, and that's fine. We can put things into the market, but understand we're missing out on some of that safety of principle on the safety and growth side. So when someone last week asked, like, hey, I have X amount of dollars to invest, what should I do with it? And that's where my first question is, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to see happen? Is this money we're going to use over the next year? Then I would say, let's have it in the safety and liquidity side, maybe throw it in a high yield savings account, or maybe the safety and growth side, throw it into a CD if it's something we're touching in 9 months, we know, or if it's not something we're touching for 3 years, but we don't want to lose it, maybe it's like a multi-year guaranteed annuity. If we don't really know what we're going to use it, but we know it's not going to be over the next year and we want to pull it out all at once at some point, maybe we put it on the market side, depending on how much risk you want to take on. So there's no magic bullet. There's no perfect investment tool. All these different tools have different purposes. And so that's where we're always looking at what are we trying, what's the goal? What are the best strategies to help achieve the goal? And then what are the best tools to utilize? So as a certified financial planner, we're acting as a fiduciary. And we're trying to put together a comprehensive plan. Like we're never one to say, hey, like I'm going to call you with a hot stock tip. We're trying to put together a comprehensive financial plan and estate plan that's meeting our clients' goals. Here's some questions. All right. Okay. All right. So here's a couple questions that have come in, and let me share my screen once I grab that question. And I saw a question just come in now, so I appreciate that. So let me move this out of the way. Move this. Give me a second. I just had it. Here it is. All right. So, all right. So let me copy this question over here, and then let me blow it up so I can read it, and then I will share my screen. And now I'm going to share my screen. All right. So the question is, how can I ensure that my digital assets, such as online accounts, crypto, intellectual property, are properly managed, transferred to my heirs after I pass away? Can those be put into a trust? So these are all different things. So with regards to access to your online accounts, that can be tricky. Depending on the type of account, that account or that login, like Facebook, Facebook has a feature where you can appoint, like, God forbid I pass, here's who's going to take it over. So some of these places have those features naturally built in. With regards to your passwords, there's no perfect answer. Some people like write down all the logins and passwords, but unfortunately you have to change your passwords like every 3 months or 6 months, it seems like these days. I personally use a password manager that manages all my online passwords, and it has like a master login to access it. So it's kind of like if they know the master key, they can get all the logins. And that might be something to include as part of your estate planning portfolio. So understand like online logins, that's different than say cryptocurrency or intellectual property. Intellectual property, typically what we're doing is we're doing an assignment of that, assigning the IP. If it is like an actual, like we have a trademark or something like that, we're actually assigning that to the trust. That'll be a separate document, an assignment. Similar to like we would assign a LLC to the trust. So that's pretty straightforward. Crypto this is kind of like a relatively new issue. And so, and understand, I'm not an expert on like the Bitcoin stuff, like I know enough to be dangerous, but my understanding is there's two ways that you can get into crypto. One is you can use some type of online account, like a Coinbase or something like that, where you have a login, you have an account, and you can then trade in crypto. And then there's the other people that have like the actual digital wallets and stuff like that. That is above my pay grade. I think someone would have to know like whatever your unique password or something is for that digital wallet. That part, to be honest, I'm not an expert on. But with regards to the different accounts, places like Robinhood or Coinbase, those are just accounts just like any other account. And as long as that provider allows you to name a beneficiary, you can name the trust as a beneficiary. If I'm not mistaken, Robinhood allows you to name beneficiaries. Last time I checked, Coinbase didn't allow you to name beneficiaries. That could be different now. And then if that's the case, it just kind of is what it is. That's the risk you take. And so it might be something that you want to cash out sooner rather than later. So cryptocurrency, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit of the wild, wild west still. Intellectual property, that's pretty straightforward. Your online passwords, kind of difficult to manage, but again, that's going to be straightforward. So hopefully that was helpful. Right. Now, hold on. I had another question submitted ahead of time. Just some of the chat coming in. There are questions. That's funny. All right, let me share my screen again. All right, next question that was submitted ahead of time here. What type of monetary assets should I put into a castle trust? Stocks, bonds, cash, precious metals. Please consider tax consequences. What percentage of my monetary assets should I put into my castle trust? Okay. So first, let's understand what a castle trust is. A castle trust is a form of asset protection trust that protects you from creditors' lawsuits and also protects you from nursing home or Medicaid spend down if you can make it 5 years, because Medicaid has this 5-year look back period. Nice thing about the Castle Trust is it's an asset protection trust, and use a technical term, it's a grantor trust, meaning it's in your Social Security number. So we're not shielding it from taxes or anything like that. So moving any of those assets like stocks, bonds, annuities, life insurance, real estate, business, intellectual property, moving all of that into the asset protection trust. The asset protection trust can own all of that. They can own stocks, bonds, CDs, checking accounts, savings account, life insurance, fixed index annuities. Think of it like a box, okay? It's just a box that holds these different types of assets. Real estate, rentals, all of that can go into the Castle Trust. Moving the asset into the trust, there is zero consequence, because these are what's called grantor trusts. Now, not all asset protections are grantor trusts. Some might be non-grantor trusts. Some people set it up differently. We want to make this as simple as possible. We know, and our trusts have been tested, both in terms of litigation as well as with long-term care, that if you set up the trust correctly, it still can be a grantor trust. You can still be the trustee. You can still pull the money out of the trust. So long story short, you can put basically everything you can inside the trust. The one thing that cannot go inside of the trust, because you're still in debt to the IRS, is pre-tax accounts. So if you have traditional 401k or IRA money, you're still in debt to the IRS, and the IRS will not let you move that out of your name. Like you can't name your spouse joint on an IRA. Like there's restrictions, because think of it like a mortgage. Like you have a IRS mortgage on those pre-tax accounts. And that's where a lot of times over the last couple of years, really since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we've been working with our clients to pull money out of these pre-tax accounts, because most people think taxes are going up in the future. Like $35 trillion in debt. And what's the government going to do? Are they going to cut spending? No, both sides spend. They just spend on different things. Are they going to print more money? Well, no, inflation is still out of control, even if they say it's only up 2.5%. Or are they going to have to raise taxes at some point? And so most people think taxes are going to have to go up. In fact, they're scheduled to go up with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expiring in 2025. So we know in 2026, unless laws change, taxes are going up 3 to 5%. So that's where, just from a tax planning standpoint, a lot of people are pulling money out of those IRAs, paying the tax. And then once you do it, then you're free to move it into the Gassel Trust. There's a zero tax consequence on that. Now you can invest it, it can grow, and it can pass to the kids or beneficiaries tax-free. So really, any type of asset you have can go into the asset protection trust. Typically, what we recommend in terms of how much to keep in or out of the trust, we would recommend that you look at, and this is just all financial planning, we look at time horizons. So we have like a now bucket, a soon bucket, a later bucket. Now bucket would be money we might need over the next year. Soon bucket might be money over the next 1 to 10 years. Later bucket, 10 years out. So typically we recommend whatever you have in your now bucket, which is your income needs for the year, any big expenses for the year, your emergency fund, you keep that out of the trust, keep that in your checking savings. Really anything else, we would probably want to put it in the trust, the asset protection trust, because we can always pull more money out of the trust. But if we're concerned about long-term care costs, the 5-year clock does not start until we move into the trust. So I'd rather overfund the trust than underfund the trust off the bat. So, all right, hopefully that was helpful. Now here's a couple more questions coming in as I've been talking here. All right, and let me share my screen. Let me copy. Oops. Why are you not copying? There we go. All right, hold on, give me a second. All right, let me take out the names. All right, so a couple questions, excuse me, just came in, so I will answer those. And let me share my screen real quick. So we'll focus on this first one here. The first one, can you explain what is considered income when retired, i.e. withdrawals from IRAs? I'm collecting Social Security, purchasing medical insurance for my wife, who is not 65 and eligible for Medicare. How do I estimate my income for 2025? Yep, and again, this is something we'll help you with. But yeah, so income, we have to look at wages, so employment, and then if in the situation we're retired, obviously there's no wages coming in. If you have a severance, that's going to count as income. Income, really the big ones would be required minimum distribution. So anything you're forced to take out of those pre-tax accounts. Likewise, really anything we ever pull out of a pre-tax account, unless it's going to a charity, that's going to show up as taxable income. And so that's where so anything we pull out of the IRA, that's taxable income. If you have a pension, that's always taxable income. And now that's why, because we're trying to lower people's income over their retirement and what they leave as a legacy, a lot of times we're taking the lump sum buyout so we can do things with that pension. But if you take a straight pension, you have an income problem for the rest of your life. So whatever you pull out from your pre-tax accounts, pensions, and then depending on your income, 85% of your Social Security also counts as income. And understand if you're looking at using Medicare or going to the marketplace to purchase insurance, they're going to look at all of that in terms of your income. So when we're talking about pulling money from these pre-tax accounts with the idea that we know taxes are going up in the future, there's no perfect answer. But so sometimes we get up to the 24% tax bracket, pulling out. If we have $100,000 of normal income through Social Security, pensions, RMDs, we could pull out another roughly 300, do a Roth conversion or trust conversion, pay the tax now, and now it can be post-tax. And that would get us up to the 24% tax bracket, because most of our clients fall naturally in kind of the 22% tax bracket, which is going to 25% when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act ends. So if you're just looking at it from a tax perspective, it may make sense to pull out more, jump a tax bracket, go from 22 to 24, because that 22 is going to go to 25, we know, in 2026. Problem with that is if you do go into the 24% tax bracket, now your Medicare premiums are going to go up. Your health insurance costs are going to go up. Now, that said, especially if we have a lot of pre-tax dollars, it's probably going to make sense from an overall perspective, dollar amount, to still pay the higher healthcare premiums because you're going to pay less tax over the rest of your retirement. But you just do have to understand that the year you make a conversion of pulling money out of the IRAs and you get into a higher tax bracket, like a 24% tax bracket, 2 years later, your Medicare premiums will shoot up, but then once you're done, they're going to drop back down. So it's something to be aware of. And we try to thread the needle to figure out what are we trying to accomplish, what's the best option moving forward. And for every client, they have different ages and different sources of income, and that's where we're just trying to figure out what's best for their specific situation. All right, next question. So, all right, irrespective of who wins the election, tax rates are not going up for 4 years, right? Kamala says she will not let income tax expire for people making less. Trump and Musk say they will cut Social Security, blah, 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 blah. Neither one of us said anything regarding estate tax. What do I think? Tariffs. Yeah, so really, question is getting to what's going to happen after the election. And so I always take whatever they say during pre-election time with a grain of salt. They can make all the promises they want. They also have to get this stuff, unless it's through executive order somehow, they have to get it through Congress. So really, I'm paying attention, like we're paying attention, like we have the research coming in. There's experts that are trying to read the tea leaves and everything like that. I just know what the current law says. Okay. And I think it's going to be very interesting what happens in 2025 based on who wins. And I think the biggest thing that at least I'm concerned with in terms of what's going to affect my clients from a financial, legal, tax standpoint, the most important thing for me that I'm paying attention to is what's going to happen with taxes. So the current law, we have the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed in 2017, and it runs from 2018 to 2025. And really, it does a couple things from a personal level. It has artificially lowered marginal income tax brackets 3 to 5% across the board. So when that expires or sunsets, unless it's extended or there's a change, taxes across the board are going to go up 3 to 5% in 2026. That's going to affect if you're earning money now, you're going to pay a higher 3 to 5% tax. And likewise, if you're in a retirement, you're pulling money out of your IRAs or 401ks or doing Roth conversions, you're going to pay 3 to 5% more. That is the current law. If nothing happens, it doesn't matter if Trump wins or Harris wins, unless they push some other law through, that's the current law. And the other thing with that is the estate tax exemptions have been doubled under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And if we look at adjusting it for inflation, most likely 2026, if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were extended, for a married couple, you could pass $28 million tax-free, single individual, $14 million tax-free. That is if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act does get extended, which would require a passage of law with majority agreement. If it doesn't get extended, then what's going to happen is those estate tax exemptions are going to be cut in half. So now a married couple would be inflation adjusted, probably 14 million, single individual, 7 million. To be honest, that's not estate taxes are interesting, but I think people focus too much on it. And really, it's not a big winner for the government. Because when estate tax exemptions are lower, most people look at instead of leaving the money to the government. So my point is estate taxes aren't typically a huge generator for governments because especially what the wealthy do is instead of leaving the money to governments, they leave the money to charities. Because would you rather leave the money to like your favorite church or charity, or do you want to leave it to the US government? Because if you leave it to your favorite church or charity, well, guess what? It's not part of the estate tax equation. And then the more wealthy, they can set up their own foundations and things like that. Trust me, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it's not just because they're generous people. they're looking at that as a tax dodge. I'm not just singling them out. Like there's tons and tons of people that set up their own foundations and now they appoint their kids who are getting big salaries, but now all this wealth has passed through this foundation. So really like the state taxes, like it's a talking point, it's a headline, but it's not really something that's going to generate revenue for the huge revenue for the government. And so I'm looking at the election 2025. First of all, what are they going to do with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? Then the big thing, and this is the elephant in the room, is that we're $35 trillion in debt. I saw an article or a graph someone sent over, and I might be off with the dates, but over the previous 210 years, the government racked up $1 trillion worth of debt. Over the last 10 years, we've racked up $34 trillion, which is crazy. So we can't keep pushing that, kicking the can down the road. In fact, in 2019, they tried to address this with the Secure Act, which was passed to generate tax revenue. Because at the time, we were $22 trillion in debt. And at the time, there's $26 trillion sitting in your pre-tax accounts, your 401ks, IRAs, anything tax deferred. And they knew they couldn't come after that money to fill that $22 trillion hole with your $26 trillion of untaxed money because we're going into election year. If anyone said we're going to raise taxes on you, you're not going to vote for them. But what they realize are the kids are just happy to inherit anything. And so what the Secure Act really did, and this was the government waving a red flag to say, hey, we have to address this debt bubble, is that prior to the Secure Act, when the kids inherited any pre-tax dollars, they could stretch all the taxes over their lifetime. What the Secure Act said is, no, all the taxes have to be paid within 10 years. So not to sound crude, but the government wants you to die and then leave this money to someone other than a spouse as soon as possible to raise tax revenue. So you're not going to hear any of the president, any political person say, hey, we got to raise taxes because they need votes. And so really, I'm taking anything they say right now in terms of what their tax policy is going to be with a grain of salt, because two things. They're going to have to deal with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, whether they're going to allow it to expire or not. And then we have this $35 trillion debt. And I think taxes are really, I don't have an answer for how we address the debt. Like, do we raise taxes? Do we cut spending? Like neither side's going to cut spending. They just spend on different things. Or are they going to cut spending, print more money? We can't print more money. Or are they going to have to raise taxes? I really think somehow we're going to have to address this $35 trillion debt bubble. So, and I don't know. Yeah. So I'm kind of jaded with regards to politics. So I'm trying to just be as honest as possible and understand that whatever they say now, like A, there could be a complete lie. And then B, they still have to push it through the governmental process unless it's done through an executive order. So I take anything anyone says now in terms of what their promises are with a grain of salt. And so, all right, if we have Medicare cost deducted from a checking account, can it be from the escape hatch account? If not, why? Yeah, so I think a little context to this is it sounds like they have set up an asset protection trust, a castle trust. One of the things with the castle trust, think of it like a piggy bank. We can always get the money out of it. We have what we call a key holder account. And so the question is, can Medicare premiums be paid out of a key holder account, which is typically just a general checking account? Sure, you can. Typically, we would have your Medicare premiums just paid out of your normal checking account where your Social Security would come in. Which would cover, typically people have that deducted out of their Social Security. So what I would recommend is you have your normal checking and savings as your operating account. That's where money is going in, money is going out. You have your key holder account as your escape hatch to get the money from the asset protection trust back into your name if you need to spend the money, and then you can spend the money. So if I were to set it up, and I know every family kind of handles their organization a little bit different, but if I were like the way I have it set up, like I have my operating account, which is my checking account. I have a savings account at the bank, and then I have a high yield savings account, and then I would have my key holder account. So I don't like to overcomplicate things. So again, each tool, each investment should have some specific purpose. Too often when I sit down with families, especially when we're talking about funding the trust or financial planning, like I'm trying to consolidate things because people have gone 40 years of collecting these different accounts or getting a better rate at this bank versus this bank. And so I kind of view it as like a junk drawer. It's all important stuff, but it's not really well organized. And especially as you get older, I'm trying to simplify things unless there's a reason to add the complexity. So having like 30 different accounts, like yeah, I would say like you would have to have a very specific purpose to have like 30 different types of accounts. Like why do you need to have 4 checking accounts? Like if there's a reason, okay, but I it's more complicated, especially as you get older. And sometimes we have one spouse that's kind of managing all the finances. The other spouse doesn't really know what's going on. And so if that spouse who manages everything passes away, then it's more difficult for a surviving spouse who maybe wasn't the financial manager to try to figure out what's going on. And then also just managing all that stuff can get tough as you're older. And then also, God forbid, both of you pass away. Now the successor trustee, one of the kids, has to come out and figure out, like, reach out to all these different financial institutions. So one of the things that we're always doing, whether we're doing trust funding or financial planning, is try to just consolidate, try to make things as simple as possible, unless there's a reason for the complexities. All right. All right, well, that's all I got. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to email them over. We'll get them addressed next week. But with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me. I really appreciated the questions, good conversations today. Thank you so much. Make it a great week.